Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Had a little technical problems. I think maybe we got it going. But I hope everybody's had a great week. Remember to tell people about the podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're liking it. We'd appreciate it. I know last week I said that we were going to focus on some overseas issues, but we're going to have to focus on some domestic stuff first. There's just too much going on. There's just too much that's important that happened this week with the Supreme Court and whatnot. But the Supreme Court ruled Thursday that Biden's vaccine mandate for all businesses with 100 or more employees was illegal. They put a stop to that. But that's not the whole story. We're going to get into that, I hope, maybe discuss it a little bit and clear up some confusion that I've heard. Some people have been asking me and some things like that. So basically that part of it is done. Okay, so what's done is the federal government cannot mandate that businesses with 100 or more employees must require vaccination. But remember, guys, this does not keep the individual businesses from mandating it on their own. You know, these are privately owned businesses and they can do what they want to do. A lot of companies were waiting to see what the Supreme Court was going to say before they did anything. But just remember that. Just because the federal government can't mandate it does not stop a privately owned business from doing so. That's just the truth of it. The problem was Biden was trying to get OSHA to enforce this. And what the court said was that they deemed it complete government overreach, trying to include OSHA in health and safety to put these tremendous fines on people that we talked about. That's the part that got them in trouble, was choosing a certain number. 100 employees compared to 99. What's the difference? That was the argument. And trying to include OSHA and trying to make this a health and safety issue, basically trying to get around the Constitution. And this is what the justices said: no, you can't do that. The problem with this is that the court allowed Biden's mandate on all healthcare workers to remain in place and to be legal. A lot of your hospitals, a lot of these healthcare places have been mandating it anyway, like we talked about last week. A lot of people getting fired for not taking it. So that's going to continue. That's going to stay in place. In some of their opinions, they reference the fact that since Medicare and Medicaid are involved in health care, the government has a right to intervene. Well, has anybody thought about all the ways that government is involved in different areas of your life? Student loans, etc., etc. They're nitpicking. They're picking and choosing. On the one hand, I'm glad that a small vestige of personal freedom was preserved by striking down the workplace mandate. But then to allow the mandate on healthcare workers to stand, that's kind of like the court speaking out of both sides of its mouth. Either Americans have the right to decide what goes in their bodies or they do not. It's just that simple to me. I don't see the difference. I don't see where you can say, we're going to force healthcare workers to inject something in their body, but we're not going to force the mill worker. You know, are we all Americans? So you see the problem that I'm having with it. It shouldn't matter where you work. I think that the Constitution is supposed to apply to everyone. That's my point. Now, do not get me wrong. I am not trying to have a moral debate here. I'm not trying to discuss any part of that. What I'm focusing on is the constitutional law part of it. Personal freedom. Let's don't try to get into a moral debate about healthcare workers should want to do it for the safety. Unless you've had your head under a rock, you know that this vaccine is not keeping anybody from catching the virus. And it's not keeping anybody from spreading the virus. That's just a fact. So there's several hospitals now across the country that have said, because the hospital's so full, we're not going to let anybody unvaxxed in here. Well, who's in the hospital? Who's got it full? The vaccinated. Am I the only one that sees that? Come on now, but you guys know where I stand on this whole issue. If you want to get a shot every week, then go for it. God bless you. I think that you should be able to do that. I mean, every week, if you want to get one, then go get one. That's fine. I mean, if you want to wear a mask 24 hours a day, even when you sleep, hey, that's fine. That is your right. You should be able to do that. That's not what I'm talking about. But to force one group of people to get a shot that will not even slow down the chance of you catching the virus and has zero ability to keep you from spreading it, that just makes no sense to me. To pick and choose groups of people to enforce this on. What this Supreme Court ruling says to me is that the government reserves the right to pick and choose who they will or will not defend the personal rights of. That's what they did. I know a lot of people are excited because they struck down part of it, but you're missing the big picture. Do we all have human rights? Do we all have personal rights or not? That's the question. How can they pick and choose one group? I hope that we see that and we question that. Now we're going to have to deal with different states enacting state laws to counter this healthcare worker mandate. I've already seen it, so rest assured it's coming. Several states are already doing things. A lot of businesses are still keeping their mandate in place, which they have the right to do. I think it was Disney World I saw just before we came up here that they're requiring all of their employees to be fully vaccinated and boosted, and that's going to go to court. Texas is pretty much going to lead the way in this like they always do, but they're going to try to stifle the healthcare mandate because they say that they're losing so many employees that it's crippling the healthcare system. So now what we're going to run into, I don't want to put a damper on this Supreme Court decision because a lot of people were excited about it and it seemed like a great win. But I just want you to think about the big picture. So what happens now when Texas does a state rule or law that says that you cannot mandate it in their hospitals? Now you've got a state versus federal issue again. You got a states' rights issue. So I guess my whole point to this is, this isn't going away. This isn't going anywhere. We're going to hear about this forever. We're going to run into this problem. Here's what Alan Dershowitz said. He's a highly respected Harvard constitutional law professor. I watched an interview they had with him on Newsmax yesterday. Quote, he said, "It's the job of the Congress to pass laws. Until they pass a law concerning forced vaccinations, government mandates will be challenged in court." End quote. I think he got it exactly right. We haven't heard the last of this mandate mess, I'm afraid, because now it's going to trickle down to the state level and the local level. And we'd like to think it's going away, but it's not. This was just one little part of it that we've dealt with. Some great news this week. I talked last week about how they were trying to do away with the filibuster, which, the filibuster means that you have to have 60 votes in the Senate in order to get something passed out of committee. And it's really a fail-safe. So, and people miss this point. The United States is not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. A democracy basically is mob rule. The majority rules. And they just shove everything else down everybody's throat. So a constitutional democracy is different. And that's what separates us from the rest of the world. So Senators Sinema from Arizona and Manchin from West Virginia came out publicly and said they would not support the Biden, Schumer, Pelosi plan to completely destroy voting integrity, is what it would have been, by doing away with the filibuster. Because if they had done away with the filibuster, then just a majority vote would have gotten everything passed. And that's what they were trying to do. But that's the only main reason they were doing it. You see Biden's conference Tuesday where he went down to Georgia and gave this speech, calling everybody a nut or a racist if they didn't agree with mail-in balloting, mail-in voting, and have these drop boxes all over everywhere where there's no security. You just put anything in there, any way it's marked, it's counted. And that's kind of what they were trying to do. And they would have done that immediately if they'd got the filibuster changed. So to have these two Democratic senators to step out on a limb like they did and said, no, we're not going to do it. That's pretty impressive for these guys. But, you know, they've been salivating over this voting rights thing for over a year. We've been bringing it up pretty regular because they've really been pushing it. So it seems like it's dead in the water right now. Unless they can get Sinema and Manchin to change their mind, but it doesn't appear they're going to do it. I'm really surprised that they did this, to be honest. But the pressure, think about it, the pressure to go along with their party on this must have been tremendous. The only two Democrats to not go along with it, the two people to totally stop this government takeover, and they did it. So that's pretty impressive. A little surprising. Anybody that's looked at this crazy voting law for 5 minutes can see exactly what it is. I don't know if a lot of people have really paid attention. You got these talking heads on TV, they're trying to convince people that this is just a freedom to vote act. This makes voting easier, and if you don't agree with it, you're trying to keep people from voting. Well, that is completely not true if you read it. A make it easy to cheat and stay in power forever law is what it should be called, and that's exactly what it is. So the move to do away with the filibuster is dead, but do not think for a minute that they're going to give up. They're just not going to do it. Think about it. November's a long way off. That's months and months away. That gives them a chance to hatch a new plan, which I'm sure they've already got. Like when Biden, when he was down there, I tried to watch some of it, but for him to go to Georgia and give that speech and try to convince all the senators and congressmen and everybody to get behind this, and it didn't work, because I think that people are a little more educated now and they see what's in this voting rights bill. It's not what they're making it out to be. If they hadn't changed it a bit, they've been pushing it for months. So let's see what they come up with next time. And just like I said before, what they're trying to do, and they're pretty good at it, is they're trying to drive a wedge between everybody. If they can keep us separated, then they can push their policies on the different groups that they've separated. But when we all come together and we're educated and we understand what's going on, some of these crazy socialist policies will just fall apart, because people are not going to go for it once you really understand what's going on. But I think just showing, I don't know if I'm going to be called an extremist or not, but I think that just showing your ID and able to be able to vote is common sense. It's not hard to get an ID. Illegal immigrants can get driver's license. It's not that hard. But the Western Journal, let's move on, reports on the court dismissing the lawsuit against the Biden administration for canceling the Keystone Pipeline. People hadn't thought about that in a while. They hadn't talked much about it, but if you remember, on Biden's first day in office, he killed 11,000 jobs and completely destroyed our ability to stay energy independent. That was day one, by shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. Well, that was being financed by a Canadian company, and they filed a lawsuit. So that's been going on, right at a year now. But now the lawsuit has been tossed out, and that's over with. So the Keystone Pipeline, if anybody was hanging on to any dreams that it may get started back up, no. Not for the next 3 years anyway. That's over. Project Veritas has released documents they acquired from the military. Pretty good stuff. Proving that COVID was created in the Wuhan, China lab by Fauci's organization, the NIH, National Institutes of Health. But that's not new to any of us, is it? We've been talking about it for 2 years, that we knew exactly where it came from, the Wuhan lab. But now they've got these documents from our military that prove it. The CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, was on every news channel last weekend. I don't know if you saw that. But she admitted that 75% of all COVID deaths had at least 4 comorbidities. That's a big word that just means they had 4 other health issues, okay? Diabetes, being obese, different stuff. That's a comorbidity. So 75% of these COVID deaths had 4 other problems, and that 50% of all hospitalizations were for non-COVID issues. She was on TV. The director of the CDC, she just finally had to admit it because they have a Freedom of Information Act where they make them release this stuff. So she couldn't just keep hiding it. She had to tell it, and she did. But these COVID deals like we talked about were listed as COVID because that's where the money was at. What was it? I forget now. It's been a year since we talked about it, but it was like $11,000 the hospitals were getting for a COVID patient and $36,000 a patient if they went on a ventilator. It added up being big money. So that's why they were doing it, because the government was paying it. That's all documented fact. You can find that easy. Fox News also has a related story about New York City being forced because of the Freedom of Information Act. But New York City had to release their documents that showed pretty much the same thing that the CDC showed, that 50% of all New York City hospitalizations were for non-COVID issues. And then once they got in there, they tested them and found they had COVID, so they were able to turn it in as COVID and get the money. And that's just what they all did, and that's what we knew. But it's nice to see them admit it, and have to tell it. Now, this next one is a head shaker. I got to give you a head shaker each week. Just give you one to say, are you serious? The Washington Free Beacon reports that the NIH, headed by Fauci, gave $205,562 of our taxpayer money. That's our money that Fauci spent, okay? Almost $250,000 to study why transgenders have high rates of HIV and AIDS. I know a lot of kids that could probably tell you why. But we needed $250,000 to research this? Well, listen how he did it now. Part of this research included giving feminizing hormones to male monkeys to see how it affected their immune system. So, one question I have is, where's PETA in all this, right? Aren't they concerned about the mistreatment and the torture of animals? They did issue a statement, and they said this: monkeys cannot get HIV, so a study in humans would be far more effective. Really? That's what you've got to say when Fauci's taking our tax money and giving estrogen shots to male monkeys? Oh my goodness. Tucker Carlson reported on this on his show Tuesday. That'd be an easy way for you guys to find the link and look it up. I really have to fight the urge to go into depth on how crazy this is, but let's move on. I'll let you look it up. Let's look overseas just for a minute. I don't want to run out of time. A lot of countries have color-coded passes now, okay? You've heard me mention how in Israel there's a green pass. A green pass means you can go certain places, do certain things. You don't have the restrictions on you, okay? But there's different colors that designate your vaccination status. A lot of countries have this. Fox News reports you cannot get served at any McDonald's restaurant in Israel unless you have a green pass. So unless you've been vaccinated and boosted, no Big Mac in Israel. Can't get it. It might be a good thing for your cholesterol level, right? But Reuters.com, you can find this: Australia has reintroduced all of their lockdowns for the unvaccinated. They've even went a step further. Listen to this. If you don't have the shot, you pretty much cannot leave your house. I'm not exaggerating. I guess they're wanting these people to starve to death. Because I watched the interview, and the guy said, he's one of their directors of the health ministry, he said going to work or going to the grocery store is not allowed. Wow. So in Australia, if you don't get the shot, I guess you don't eat. They're making it pretty serious for a shot that will not keep you from catching it. So, here's the question. How in the world are governments going to catch all the people who don't obey? Glad you asked. The Jerusalem Post answers that for us. Guess what China's doing? The people that gave us this wonderful virus, look what they're doing. China now offering rewards to people who report other people for COVID violations. They've got a whole big list. You can look this up on the Jerusalem Post and see how they've got it. But China has 3 categories: green, yellow, and red. Green is no restrictions. Yellow has to be isolated for 7 days. Excuse me. And red has to isolate 14 days. I'm reading from the form that China hands out, okay? Successfully catching a yellow pass violator is 300 yuan. That's like their money. A red pass violator is 500 yuan. It's about $250. You can figure whatever their number is to understand it in our money, just cut it in half and you'll get a good idea. If you snitch on an illegal immigrant, they'll give you 1,000 yuan. Listen to this. If you can find an illegal immigrant with COVID, they'll give you 10,000 yuan. That's $5,000 for you to go around snitching on your neighbor, try to catch people. That's how the government's going to do it. I actually, when I was reading this, I was shocked because it's like China has basically taken George Orwell's book 1984 and made it their operator's manual for life. That's what they're doing. That's exactly what Orwell wrote about in the 40s when he wrote that book. And that's what they're doing. Neighbors watching neighbors, turning them in, trying to get them in trouble. And for that type of money, for people that don't have any money, that's a pretty good incentive. Just not going to have time to mention all the different countries. You can look all this stuff up, but Austria has went crazy as usual. Germany also, with some of the mandates and the lockdowns and requirements. This is one thing that I really want to talk to you about. Blaze Media has a good report on this. I wish you guys would look it up because I can't really go in depth on it. But Scotland has experienced a big spike in infant deaths. Around the world, infant mortality has steadily declined for the past 50 years, but the last month they give us records for, back in September, in the nation of Scotland, the number of deaths doubled. Well, that's big. I mean, that doesn't happen. The PHS, which is the Public Health of Scotland, issued a statement. Listen close to what he said now. Listen to this. This indicates there's a higher likelihood that there are factors beyond random variation that may have contributed to the number of deaths that occurred. So there's factors that contributed to this that's not just normal or random. That's what he said. So what he said was something caused this. Okay? That same day that he issued that statement, the BBC came out and said, quote, "There is no evidence that COVID was a factor." They kind of like preemptively said this after his statement, because all of us were thinking, what factors is he talking about? And then all of a sudden you got that. My main question is, okay, if COVID was not a factor in it, what about the shot? They didn't mention that. They won't mention it. Is there anything to do with it? Not that it is, but shouldn't we be asking that? What about the shot? The director said factors beyond random variation, but he would not give any clue as to what those factors are. Please go look this up, like when you have time. The death rate in Scotland, and go to Blaze Media, because they've got several links that go with this story. A lot of information about adverse reactions in women that you will not hear on the news. They've got stats, documents from each nation, like our CDC. Well, you know, every nation has something like that, and they've got these stats that you can't get around. You look at it, and it is what it is. So go look that up. It's pretty impressive. This is something else you guys need to look up. This is awesome. But Israel's come out with a new drone that has a machine gun mounted on it. This thing is wicked bad, if you can see it. They call it the Smash Dragon. It's a big drone, and it's got a fully automatic machine gun on it. This type of thing could change warfare. All those sci-fi movies that we've seen where these robots are fighting each other, guys, we're not that far from that. We've got it. So go look up the Smash Dragon, Israel's new drone weapon. You can find pictures easy. All the talks they're having with Putin right now about his threatening Ukraine don't seem to be going anywhere. Poland even came out they're getting involved in talking about an all-out war if Russia invades Ukraine. We heard it on the news coming over here again. I really, really don't think that Putin is going to invade Ukraine. I could be wrong. I hope he don't. But, he could. Who knows what Vladimir Putin is going to do. But I really don't think that he's going to do it. I think he's using this threat to get Germany and the rest of Europe to lift the restrictions on his Russian oil and gas pipelines. They've got a lot of restrictions because Russia kind of had a monopoly on the oil and gas in certain parts of Europe. And they were putting restrictions on that, trying to make it fair. So I think that Putin's doing this, trying to threaten people so they'll release his gas and oil where he can make more money. That's what I think. I hope I'm right. Amir Zarfati has reported that he's over there in Israel. He sees all this stuff, so you can count on him. Multiple cargo planes arrived in Syria this week from Iran, and the only time they do that is when they're bringing in weapons to the rebels. So that means you can rest assured the next couple of days you will see a lot of airstrikes from Israel into Syria. They're on top of this stuff. So when Iran brings the stuff in, Israel goes and blows it up. So don't be all excited about that. That's going to happen. Now, if they destroy Damascus, that's another issue. That's prophecy. The civil war in Yemen continues. Saudi Arabia has now jumped in this civil war. They've carried out airstrikes helping one faction of the civil war. Who knows where that's going to go. Saudi Arabia is our ally, so you have to watch what goes on with them too. You got people in Lebanon that are marching and protesting. Their economy is completely shut down. They have no electricity. There's no food. When people have no food is when rebellion starts. Always remember that. We're so blessed to live in America. We are so blessed. I hope you guys know that. With all the problems we have, it is nothing compared to what most people around the world have to deal with. When we start complaining, we should be ashamed of ourselves. We are so blessed here. Hope that we know that. If you've accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, this is as bad as it's ever going to get, people. We got a better day coming. But listen to this promise from our Lord. Revelation 21, I'll read verses 4 and 5. If you're a Christian, this is what you've got to look forward to. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain. For the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. So you can believe it. But we've got a great day coming. So thank you guys for listening. Hope I gave you some resources, something to go look up, something to think about. Tell somebody about the video if you're enjoying it. And y'all try to go to church Sunday if you can. And by all means, y'all keep reading your Bible. Thanks, guys.